says we're 5 seconds long. Newborns.
Hardly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Radio Tiny House. I'm Barry Smith.
And I'm Beth Smith.
She is. And wait, she has
a hair.
Well, we may as well just leave that in because that's a good part of my life is pulling hairs off of Beth.
That's true.
Off of her black clothes or her navy clothes. Because if the wind catches them, then they get in my face and in my nose.
Yes.
So welcome. Hope you're having a great day. You see, if you've been following us and watching our podcast on YouTube, that we're in a new space today.
Yeah, it's not quite ready.
It's not quite ready, but we had to. Vacate is not the right word. That sounds like somebody pushed us out.
We decided to rearrange.
We did decide. We decided to rearrange. And
actually,
I did.
I
helped. I did want to turn this into a podcast studio and a video studio.
Right.
But what we did do was where we have been doing the podcast for the last 25 episodes.
Yeah.
Or shall I say our first 25 episodes.
Right.
We put my drums in there. So now that's a drum room.
Yes,
which
it is.
They have not had a place
years.
Since about 10 years. Yeah. So,
because every time we get a drum room for Barry, because he doesn't use those, electronic drums, he has a vintage set of drums. Every time you get a space for Barry, somebody moves into it.
That's true.
Right. So we ended up having an extra grandchild come visit or live. We had one thing after the other. And then we moved Tiny.
Right.
Did we have the drums up in the big house?
Yeah, when we lived in Alpharetta, we had when we first moved in, I had my drums set up,
and then
our grandson was born,
right?
And it was like, okay, well,
right.
I'd rather have him than the drums.
So anyway, long process to get him his own drum room.
Right.
So it's now where the podcast studio used to be, and it's got a door and it's got a window within it in the room, and you'll see that eventually. We'll finally reveal it, but so we can at least shut him in. Now, drums are loud, and I love it. He is very cognizant of that, but I actually love walking on the property and hearing you play drums. The problem is he just needs some big, giant speakers so I can actually hear what he's playing along with instead of what's in his ears, because then I can enjoy it better.
When she told me that the other day, I about fainted, and I said, what? And
I want you to buy more
I
technology.
want you to buy speakers so I can hear what you're playing too. Because I just normally put my earbuds in and go and play.
And so I'm singing along to some other song that I think he's playing, probably. So anyway, so that's exciting. So his drums are in there. His voice what do you call it?
Recording studio
recording studio's in there.
And we don't play drums at the same time.
No, he doesn't play drums while he's recording narration for commercials.
Right.
So that's that.
Unless it's a drum commercial.
I guess you could add an extra track.
So those of you who might want to know, it is a vintage set. It's not like from the 1940s or anything, which would be cool to have. But it's a 1970s Slingerland kit that I've had for a long time.
Yeah.
Most of my life, actually.
It was used when you bought it, but
it was used.
You have been around since the 70s.
That's true. Yes. I have been around since the 70s. So it was used when we got it, but it was still a 70s set. Because you can go to slingerland.com and check and see when your kit was made, which is kind of cool.
Interesting.
But Dad bought that.
This I did not know.
When I was a teenager for me. I had a Gretsch set before. That when I started playing drums
we're getting into a drummer hole.
We're getting into a drum hole, yes. Not a drum hole, but a drum roll. I'm on a drum roll.
Yeah, that.
So I had a Gretsch set originally that was it was a beautiful set, and it was the tone was just amazing, but it weighed a ton, and traveling with that was just a major pain in the butt. So
we should insert that's how Barry and I met. We started traveling together doing gospel music.
Southern gospel music, right?
Gospel music, which I had never sung or performed before, but I was like, well, sure, I can sing that because I was off for teacher break in the summertime. And that's how we met. And he was carrying and hauling this same set of drums.
I was.
And I used to help him put it up and whatever. Anyway, we fell in love during that time. So that's a whole other life. Although I did find our vinyl record the other day, and we have a couple of cassettes and things like that we've done over the course. We certainly never really did full-time professional, but we had a lot of fun. Anyway, and I'm trying to find some of our other music that we've made because we don't have a cassette player. So we're trying to find
who does.
Trying to find digital copies. It's all very complicated. But anyway, we enjoyed. Oh, I hit the table. We enjoyed doing that. And that's how we met. We traveled all over the U.S.
Yep. And Canada.
We went into Canada.
Had a bus.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did that for a couple of years. So anyway, we still have the drums.
We do still have the drums.
And so
I wish we still had the bus.
Well, that's true. We'd have our own tiny home on wheels. Anyway, so he's set up, and now he can play again.
Yeah, it's nice. I love to play.
So we've changed the whole dynamic of our podcast.
We have.
Tiny little space we were in is now a lofted barn, which the sound is different. We're working on the ceiling. We're working on the lights. This morning we tried to do the video, and the curtains were down and the lights were all messed up, and we're like, well, I got a staple gun and stapled a curtain up on the wall.
And like we had been in the podcast studio, we had blocked off a window. So it was kind of a controlled lighting environment.
Right.
And now we come into this, and this is all just natural lighting, which is both good and bad.
Right.
Because we've got shadows and stuff like that.
The sun is hard for us to control.
Right. But we're going to have to prepare for the day when we don't have sunlight, because it's raining outside or cloudy.
We could record in the dark.
We could record in the dark. That might be fun.
Might be easier.
We could do a glow in the dark episode. That would be fun.
Well,
anyway,
I don't remember how to glow in the dark anymore.
Anyway,
so we're in the middle of it, and it's taking us forever because we both are very busy. And we've talked about redoing this office. We actually sort of have carpets on the floor now. I'm going to repaint the floor. It's just a shed floor.
Right.
This is a 12 by 32 lofted barn that we did as a rent to own when we were building.
It was a drag and drop
thing. Rent to own. And I used it for my office because I was employed with corporate at the time. Thank God I'm not anymore. But now we're converting it into homeschool room, podcast, video cast studio. And then we're having it be like a bunkie for our daughter who wants to come, other daughter who wants to stay, or guests who want to come stay. And then we also are using it as a place where our less able folks can get in and go to the bathroom and whatever, because we're putting a porta potty up here, so we can have people that are less able to walk up our stairs.
We're putting a ramp up to it and all that kind of fun stuff.
So we can have parties here that we can have more handicap accessible. So that's a lot of stuff, and we've had to figure it all out. And so there you go. It's taken us a bit.
Well,
and I was not going to drywall over my head.
Yes.
So we have done something very interesting on the ceiling.
And we've got videos and pictures of all that. Yes, we are.
Close. And there you have it. So we've been working, and then I've been working. So COVID, I may have mentioned before that I started out of corporate. Once I left corporate, thank the maker, I started doing professional organizing because we had downsized.
Right.
And that was my business. Then during COVID, I ended up going back and doing some kind of recruiting, which has been my background. And so I wasn't really doing organizing. And a couple of my clients have called me and said, would you please come help? And so I have been in organizing zone. I won't say hell, but I worked almost every day in the month of March, which I never do, but we had some big projects we had to get done. So I am back to feeling who I am myself today, but that was really a long haul. So we kind of got behind.
I'll also say that when we do a project, we don't do just a little tiny thing. We usually do something major,
like build two houses,
yeah, or take on this project, because it started out as one thing, and then we've decided, it constantly evolves. And so, but by doing that, we get to make it exactly what we want it to be and what we need it to be for what our life is. So
Well,
why
and
not?
we realize we can go, oh, what about if we do this? And then we'll start out like I posted an inspiration picture. Oh, this is my inspiration for this. And we have totally evolved away from that.
Right.
But that's okay. As things present themselves, we decide, oh, that's a good idea. And that's the creative part we like. But sometimes it takes us a wandering way to get there. So we're hopeful we can get this done in the next couple of weeks.
Right.
We're traveling, so we want to
We
get
are.
that done before then if we can. And I'm sure Barry will want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to talk about
trip.
that again. We talked about that last week, but it's coming up next week. So we're actually, I think we're going to do a podcast from there. We may even go live a couple of times.
Where are we going?
We're going to Disney World. No,
you wish.
Well, I do. I love Disney World. In particular, I love Epcot. But we're going to Laurel, Mississippi.
Wow.
Which is,
Why would anybody go to Laurel, Mississippi?
Who knows? I mean, Laurel, we pulled out an atlas and we closed our eyes and we went and we landed on Laurel.
All right. Why would anybody go to Laurel?
Laurel, Mississippi is the hometown of a show called Hometown that features renovation work of Ben and Erin Napier.
Is it on HG? It's on HG.
I think it's on HGTV, yes.
Yeah. Barry, this is how I watch television. Now we have Hulu and Netflix and Stars and HGTV or Discovery Plus or Real TV, I call it. I don't know where anything is. I don't know even how to run the TV anymore. So Barry just presents the evening entertainment to me. I watch it. So I don't even know what channels things are on anymore.
When I'm not home and Beth wants to watch TV,
TV,
she calls our grandson over to come and turn everything on.
I'll just get on YouTube on my phone. It's the easiest.
So anyway,
there's so many choices and channels. I don't even know what's
we
what.
watch Hometown. A lot of people, were watching Chip and Joanna and have made trips to Waco.
Yeah, it's true.
And
That's true.
they do beautiful stuff as well. But
I don't even know. I guess they're still on.
They are still on. They have their own network.
That's right. Well, yes, Magnolia Network.
We do too.
That's true. That's true.
But anyway, we like what Ben and Erin do.
Yeah, they're adorable too.
And they do a lot of very small cottagey kind of homes that many people would consider to be tiny homes.
Yeah.
Now they do monster homes as well. They did one that was 3,800 square feet.
Yeah, but I mean,
like
and back to, one of the things they did was like 650 square feet, I think.
Right,
and then they did that little one by the lake we watched the other day. That was very small. So, we're attracted. Why are we attracted to tiny houses? We're attracted to tiny houses because they could be creative. They're less expensive, right? And oh my God, I just saw that Home Depot is trying to sell or is selling plywood for $95 a sheet, up from $30 a sheet less than a year ago.
Right.
So, I mean, people use plywood in their houses. So back to, we talked about why we go tiny, and I'm going to change what we just talked about because we kind of prep for the thing. But
sorry.
The reason
you're doing something off the cuff? Oh my gosh.
The reason we are going tiny, I think, of people really interested in tiny right now is cost.
Yeah.
Right? How many sheets of $95 a sheet plywood does it take to build a 3,000 square foot house versus a 700 or
right.
200 square foot house?
So yeah, the cost over the last year, 9 months really, has gone up just exponentially. So like
180 to 80%. But then if you do the math around $30 to $95, isn't that like, I don't even know, 300%,
right,
or
yeah.
$33 to $95? I don't know.
And of course, we've talked about this, but if you haven't listened to that podcast, there are multiple reasons for that. One of them is fires out west. So we lost millions of acres of trees.
Lumber companies were backing down because of COVID for various reasons. They didn't think that we were going to need it. They didn't have the staff.
Right.
People weren't cutting lumber. Right. All that. And then.
Well, and then COVID
happened, and then everybody started building, which I still haven't figured out what that was about.
Boredom.
Why? Maybe
builders were going.
Everybody's moving everywhere.
We were bored, so let's go build a new neighborhood. I don't know. It was weird.
So now all that has created this huge shortage in the products that we need. But the rumor is that it's not going to go down.
Yeah, which is a little concerning, especially if you're if you're thinking about building your own home in the next couple of years. if you started that process like when we started thinking about building a tiny house, we thought about it for years.
Yeah.
I mean, Beth had been in the
Googling
tiny house movement
Pinteresting.
before the tiny house movement was cool.
Yes, exactly.
But it's crazy how expensive everything's gotten.
Yeah. So anyway, we got a little off track, but anyway, Lauren and
Erin
and Ben in Laurel. There you
Right,
go. I'm
right.
mixing that all together. Erin and Ben are building.
Well, you could just call it Napier, and then you get Laurel, Ben, Erin, and Napier.
Right. So they're converting houses that would otherwise go to the dumpster, which we're all about that too. We reclaim and recycle as much as we can. Yes, I don't want, and we did that a lot in our first house.
Yes, we did.
It was all reclaimed as much as we could do that. So we did that, but they're reclaiming homes that otherwise would just be torn down.
Right.
And they're also saving their town. And we think and believe that tiny towns are real important to the fabric of our nation.
Yes.
And so we want to celebrate and grow or support tiny towns as much as we can, because there are so many people who want that lifestyle too.
Right.
Living in a big city, you got all kinds of things that are cool. You got great restaurants, better internet. That's what we struggle with all the time. And then, but if you can figure out how to live small in a small town, then you have a lot of advantages of that we support.
Right. Well, I mean, we do. Beth and I both grew up in the Atlanta area.
Yeah. And have lived in town in primarily subdivisions and, downtown. We lived in downtown Tacoma, which was cool. Actually, I loved living in that part of downtown. It was a neat thing. Yeah. But living in Seattle is nothing like living in Atlanta.
Living in Seattle is not anything at all like living in Atlanta. And it's, you get the vibrancy of the city, you get the amenities of the city. So you get the sports teams, you get the theaters, you get restaurants, all that kind of stuff, which is fun to go do every now and again.
Yeah.
But for me, if I'm going to live in a city, I want it to be a place like Charleston that is easily walkable, that has history and a whole lot of cool stuff there. But my preference is a rural lifestyle in a small town. I'm not a farmer. I'd love to be a farmer.
Like to be one. We sort of are hobby farmers.
We are hobby farmers. We're hobby animalists.
That's true. We are hobby animalists.
Goats.
And I've grown a little garden.
True. Yes. But
my closest thing to farming.
It wasn't a little garden. It was pretty big. We had more squash and zucchini than I've ever seen in my life. But
well, that's common for most gardens. And tomatoes.
And tomatoes, yes. But I prefer, that's just me. And when you want to build a tiny house or do the live in a smaller footprint, it's just easier to do if you have your own property and you have your own space and you can do those kind of things.
Well, and legally, back to the things that frustrate us, is legally it's a lot easier to find a place to do what we've done outside of a city and then in a small town. And people now are starting to embrace, small towns want people to move back, right?
Right.
So there are several tiny house neighborhoods starting in smaller towns to draw people there. So I think the whole notion of tiny houses. Now we use that term for anything from 100 square feet, maybe on wheels, to 700 or 800 square feet, which is where we live. So we live in a small house, but and the terminology. Also, people now use that for van living, for schoolies, for whatever. So it's a pretty broad brush of what tiny really is. But I think a lot of towns are starting to embrace the small house, micro house, walkable concept.
Which is interesting because that's the way most houses used to be.
It used to be, right.
Most houses were small and only the very wealthy, the Rockefellers had big houses. Everybody else that worked for them lived in a small house.
Well, then people decided to start legislating what size you could live in, which seems so wrong to me. Who cares? Now, I understand slumlords. We don't want people to live in substandard housing. I get all that. And I think there is a limit that if you're looking at living tiny, people say, how small can I go if I've got 5 kids? I'm like, you do not want a tiny house if you got 5 kids. I just think that's a mistake, but maybe 2 tiny houses, throw the kids in the other one or something.
Well, depending on age, yes.
Right. Well, yeah, of course. But we live in 700 square feet We use our upper floor for kind of an office and a bedroom, and our downstairs is busy all the time.
Right.
But we also now have this shed. So you could say that was an easy way for us to get extra square footage to do some of the extra things we felt like we wanted to do. And then, of course, Caroline lives on our property
and has
a
tiny house one.
Tiny house one.
Well, I'm going to always refer to it as tiny house. Tiny house is easier for me to say and remember than small house, although it is a small house. But tiny is whatever you want it to be. If you move from a 10,000 square foot house to a 2,000 square foot house, that's a tiny house to you.
Right. So I think back to the small town thing. I think small towns are looking at that too as a source of income. And maybe some of them are getting over the fact, and I want to mention that we're getting over the fact that they don't have to be 1,200 square feet. They don't have to be whatever. We're going actually to an event in May that we'll put in the show notes here. It's in Calhoun, Georgia, where my family lives. And they're trying to build small homes. They're not on wheels. They're not. They're small
They're
cottages.
Houses,
and they're 400 to 600 square feet or
something like that.
They're focusing on having reasonable housing for veterans, but they're really getting pushback from the community because they're concerned about people living in small houses. And I understand that sometimes with less expensive housing comes concern from the other neighborhoods that it's going to take the price of their house down.
Right.
But if you really do the math and you look at what is a per square foot fee, a tiny house costs way more per square foot than a bigger house because bedrooms are cheap and bathrooms and kitchens are expensive.
Right.
Foundations and plumbing and electrical are expensive. So if you really do the math and think it through, it could raise the prices of the houses in the area.
That's exactly right.
Because that's what people do use for comps, right? A lot of times they're looking for price per square foot. Anyway, so in May we'll post that in this, but we are advocating for small towns, small houses, which is one of the reasons we end up watching Hometown,
right?
And now why we're going to Laurel, Mississippi,
right?
Check it out.
If you live in a town that's considering allowing tiny houses or allowing a small tiny house community for vets or single moms or whatever the case may be.
It doesn't have to be any kind of person. There are a lot of people who want to live in tiny houses.
Go be an advocate for that. We're one of the reasons we want to go to this event in Calhoun is to not only broadcast from there and to video from there, but to be advocates for this lifestyle, because there's nothing that's negative about the lifestyle. And a lifestyle sounds like you're talking about some type of deviancy, but it's not. It is in a way.
People do think that we're being deviant by wanting to live in a small house.
Well, it is in a way because it is against the norms.
It is that. And I know communities are concerned about tax dollars, right?
Right.
So if I'm living in a 400 square foot house, I'm not going to pay nearly as many taxes as I am if I'm living in a 1,200 or 4,000 square foot house.
Right.
Right. But if you can take and put a bunch of small houses on a lot, right, then you can raise your tax base.
That's right. So
and increase the density. Yes, I get that, but it's better than apartments. I think it's better than apartments.
100%. You probably just heard the little window unit air conditioner kick on. It's a little warm here today, but that's one of the things that we never had in the podcast studio because it was out in the front part of the office. But it also got hot back there, and it gets really, really hot in the recording studio.
Well,
so the plan is eventually to put mini splits.
Right, but that's another, however much that costs. So
yes.
Right now, step by step.
Step by step. That's exactly right. So if you're hearing that, then just think cool thoughts.
Right, exactly. We are air conditioned.
Now we're going to talk about next, so we've kind of already spoken about this a little bit, about one of the top reasons for going tiny or sheddy is to focus on the outside, which is we've talked about that a little bit already.
Yeah, by having the right town and the community and getting out of your house and not sitting in your house all day watching. Well, I can't watch
TV, Hometown.
I don't even know how to run it, but Barry helping me watch TV.
So one of the great things about living tiny that I think is that we have because of where we chose to build and how we chose to build, we have a lot of outside space. So we can go outside and work. We can go outside and get away from each other. With the office fixed up, I can come up here and play my drums, or I can record, or Beth can come up here.
Or I can shoo him out and send him up to the
just get out of the house. Go away. Go away.
Or I can leave.
Or you can leave, or you can come up and play drums.
I can. Well,
when you're really irritated at me.
Yeah, that.
But it's not just about you. It's about focusing on your town and on your community, and kind of breathing new life into small town America.
Yeah,
because that's what made America. Yeah, the cities made America. The industry helped build America, but it was rural America that
really
fed
shaped us.
shaped us, and still actually feeds the world. So we need to not allow corporations to buy up all the property, and let's buy property, build on it, live on it, help towns thrive again.
Right.
They may never get back to their heyday, although I don't know if a small town, what the heyday of a small town might have been.
Well,
it might be 10 years in the future.
Theirs was lumber,
Mhm.
interestingly enough, because we just had this whole conversation
Right.
about how expensive lumber is. Back to with tiny houses, you can do this in a city because cities are starting to adopt it. But obviously, we live rurally. We live in a tiny house on a foundation. That's what we know best. But there are other ways to get to tiny. Doesn't
Right.
have to be you build a shed like we did or a reclaimed house. You can do something like what they're doing in hometown.
Right.
Wetumpka, Alabama is their next feature.
Right. Yeah.
But there are a lot of things out there. Like, I don't know, they're buying these things for like $12,000, and now they're spending a lot to rehab them. Don't get me wrong, but you can't even buy a lot for $12,000.
Right. Yes. And some of the houses are more expensive than that. But some,
the last one we just saw was 12. Some of them
Right.
are like 60. Some of them are like less than 200. I've never seen them go any more than 200.
Right. And that includes the purchase of the house and all the renovations that they do.
Right. But of course, as they're continuing to renovate, what's happening to the properties in Laurel, Mississippi?
The value is going through the
value
roof.
is skyrocketing. So they're going to have a harder and harder time finding inexpensive houses to redo because of their own work, which
Right.
is kind of oxymoron, I guess. But anyway, so we're going to Laurel. We're going to videotape. We're going to podcast. We're going to, we've got a couple of days planned. I'm itching to get to the beach again. It's 2 hours from the beach. In Laurel, they have this train station that stops there that goes from.
Well, the train station technically doesn't stop
Okay.
there.
Right, the
The
train
train
stops
does.
there at the station, and the train goes from New Orleans to New York City.
Right.
Right, and I was like, "Oh, wouldn't it be fun to take a train from Laurel to New Orleans and then come back?" Well, unfortunately, it goes the wrong direction timing wise.
Right. And it's only one a day.
One a day, so I couldn't make that work. But that just sounds fun too. So I
Right.
love trains, and
I love trains too. I love.
yeah. But anyway, so we're
that's
just going to go have
the
fun.
best way to sleep on the planet is to sleep on a train.
Yeah, and we're looking at staying in a tiny house on wheels at the beach. We haven't decided and committed, but I think I really want
You
to.
think
It's
you
still
want
available?
to? Okay.
So
Yeah. So
you know.
anyway, small towns. Now,
Small towns.
I had when we moved up here, our small town had been kind of revitalized. There's still some
Our
parts we're
criteria
still
was
working on a little bit. Yeah. Go ahead.
our criteria was small town,
Right.
had to have a Starbucks,
Right.
and had to have a Home Depot,
Right. Yes.
and that's why we decided to live here.
Yeah. So, but I've worked in. I worked in Aberdeen, Washington, at a hospital there. I ran a program there, and Aberdeen was a huge lumber town on the coast of Washington. And lumber, they got all the lumber out, and the lumber business kind of took a nosedive for a while. And most of the jobs went away. Downtown, when I was there, was still mostly boarded up. There were no shops. There was a handful of people that were trying to open up restaurants and coffee shops and stuff like that. And now I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day, who's the CEO of the hospital there, and Aberdeen's done a complete turnaround because people have gone back and said, "Oh, this is a seaside town."
Yes.
And so we're going to build houses here. We're going to open businesses here. It is not an easy place to get to. It's not like driving from Atlanta to here. From Olympia to Aberdeen is probably an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes, over some absolutely beautiful. Well, the roads aren't beautiful; they're asphalt, but the scenery is just absolutely gorgeous because you're going through mountains and forests, and but if it snows, you can't get there.
Or rain.
So it rains, yeah. But so people have finally discovered that, Aberdeen is a place where you can get things inexpensively, and you can have a second home close to the beach.
I didn't know this, but yeah, that's great. And I think that what's changed, COVID has changed a lot of things. The housing crisis has changed a lot of things. And also people are being able to work from home. And, you've seen that in New York City, you've seen that in LA, you're seeing that in San Diego, where people are dispersing from bigger towns.
Right.
People are going, hey, I can live in my house in Massachusetts instead of commuting into New York. I can live in Texas. The influx from California to Texas has been enormous as people are. And by the way, Texas is a great place to live tiny. They don't have a lot of rules and regulations, which is what we run into a lot. So people are dispersing and moving, and I think a small town are profiting from it.
I think so too.
Which I think is awesome.
I think that when you realize that you don't have to live close to your work.
Yeah. Don't have to commute for an hour and a half.
Yeah, that it opens up a world of possibilities. So if you can live within reason, an hour away from your office, if you have to go in once a week, then that opens up a lot of possibilities. The only downside to rural living,
the biggest downside,
it's not the only one, but the biggest one is rural internet.
Crappy internet.
Mostly awful. But
it's changing.
Yeah, I've written a little booklet about that. We'll talk more about that later, about internet options for people that live in rural areas. It is changing. There's a lot of really neat things on the horizon. But anyway, 5G, Starlink, there's a whole bunch of cool things that are going to help with that.
Right.
But some of those are also a couple of years away still. So anyway.
Yeah, we didn't realize all that when we first moved because we were like, oh, internet, okay. And then we didn't realize that the internet that we had available to us was going to be so awful.
Yeah, a friend of mine
just awful.
Sent me a note the other day on Facebook and said, when we bought our property, did we consider, what was our choice for rural internet? And I went, we didn't even think about that when we bought our property.
Well, we saw, the first thing I did was check to see if we had cell service. Right. There's a cell tower within view. I was like, oh, good, we get cell service. But it never occurred to me that the internet that we would get would be like covered wagon internet compared to, Jetstream internet that we had.
We can't play the Oregon Trail because we are on the Oregon Trail with our internet.
Right. But now we have 5G, and that really helps.
Yep.
And they've upgraded our internet. We're kind of at the end of the road, so it's not as
good as
we'd
it
like
could
it to be, but it's way better than it used to be.
Right.
So, and we tried the Hughes dish thing, and that was terrible. We still have the dishes on the side of our house, and I'm trying to get Barry to get on a ladder.
I'll take those down. I have to spray them for hornets because there's about 1 million of them in the tubes. But anyway, those have got to come down. Although the house is going to look kind of funny. We're going to have to put something over there.
Yeah.
A lanai.
Okay.
Or a pavilion or something.
Anyway, we have other building projects, so we don't have to build anything else.
You ready to move on?
Sure.
From that? Okay. So we've had a lot of comments, or a couple of comments recently in our group about foundations.
Yes.
And
that you don't need one.
Right. And one of our members posted that the Tuff Shed installer, I guess it was a Tuff Shed installer because it was a Tuff Shed they purchased, said that you didn't need a foundation. You could just put it on the ground.
Well, that's what they were offering. They were just going to
put it on the ground. They were just going to drop it on the ground.
Do not do that. That is a terrible plan.
Yes, it is a terrible plan. If you buy a shed and you live in a place where you can put just a shed for your like lawnmowers or tools or a she shed or a he shed or whatever, if you want to put that on the ground, that's okay to do. But I think if you
I feel differently.
Well, I think it's, it's an easy thing to do. And if you're renting, Somebody might say, "Oh, if you're going to rent from us, you have to have it on bricks or
Well,
whatever."
like you're talking about, like drag and drop sheds.
I'm just talking like a small drag and drop shed.
Like we're in. This one is on here. This is just on concrete blocks.
Right.
Like you see them
Right.
like everywhere. This is just a shed.
Right. But if you're going to live in it, make sure it's on a foundation, and don't accept when somebody tells you, "Oh, you can put your house on the ground." Don't believe it.
Don't believe it.
Don't do it, because there's lots of issues that could arise from just putting the shed that you're going to turn into a house just on the ground. So do a concrete slab. Do a basement. Do a foundation.
These drag and drop sheds, sometimes people put them on like a gravel pad or they're on piers and things. But honestly, unless you bolt them down, we didn't even think about this when we put this here. This thing could just blow away. Now, we've had up to 90-mile-an-hour gust, and it hasn't. And we live in a pretty windy area.
We do, yeah.
The way our microclimate of our house comes up a hill, and it's pretty breezy and windy all the time.
All the time.
But if you're going to live in particularly a 2-story shed like we're in, and there will be other people who will probably, build those. They have got to be bolted to something.
Right.
A big windstorm, you just made yourself a big sail and it's going to fly off.
Yep. So make sure
you have a foundation or something.
And whether it's a Tuff Shed or any other kind of shed that can be converted into a house, especially a 2-story, make sure that it is on something. A concrete slab. We did concrete block foundation, piers, post and beam, whatever you want to do, but make sure that it's firmly attached to the ground and that you take measures to mitigate moisture, to mitigate insects, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. Do your research.
It's
out there. Everything is Googleable.
And don't just go, Googleable?
Googleable.
I kind of like that. Googleable. Are you Googleable gullible?
That could be true too.
There's a lot of that goes around.
You do have to filter.
Yes.
But everything is Googleable.
But don't accept it when especially if you've got a TR 1600, which is a big thing. I mean, it's a 2-story house. Don't let them say we're just going to put it on the ground.
No, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And that is not on my watch. I will talk to somebody. You cannot do that.
And just if that's happening to you, let Beth know and she'll go after them.
She'll go call them. Like, no, that's not going to happen. By the way, I have my Radio Tiny House t-shirt on.
You do. I don't, because there's something on mine.
But we're going to start making some merch.
Yep.
We're going to have Radio Tiny House merch. We're going to get that up this week. We've talked about it, but
we hadn't done it yet, but that's going up this week. Yeah. We're going to design
tiny house
some hats and mugs and all that kind of fun stuff, bags, whatever. If you have something you want, it's free to design it.
Yeah.
So just tell us what you're looking for, and
we're going to have a Radio Tiny House, and we'll do some tiny house type t-shirts. It doesn't have to just be Radio Tiny House.
We have a whole slew of things we'd like to say that
right. So they're coming. So we'll watch for our merch store. And then we have
size does matter. Go tiny.
Actually, I've got that one written down right there.
Do you really?
Yes. Size does matter. Save the planet. Tiny.
I thought I was coming up with something original.
I just did that one.
I don't look at her notes because
it's right there on my note.
That's her property, and I don't have the right to look at that. I don't think
it's called a shared brain. Well, we've been living together so long.
We've been married more than a year, and so we do share a brain.
We do have share a brain. All right. So, what's upcoming? We're continuing with our work from home tiny house series.
Right.
So I was just in conversation with Kiki, the girl we met at the tiny home show and festival, and she's got a tiny house shop.
Right.
Made out of a tiny
She's got a shop made out of a tiny house. What could be a tiny house?
I don't think it has.
It's a tiny
really
shop.
A house. It's a tiny, it's a tiny shop. So she's going to be near us this weekend. We're going to try to get out there. Then John from United Tiny House has agreed to, who did the show we went to. We froze our butts off. Yeah. He's going to come as a guest on our show, but he's got a beautiful, he's really working on his property. Bed and breakfast basically is. And then he designed this really cool tiny house, but it's not a house, firehouse.
Right.
So we'll feature him on that. That's upcoming in the next few weeks. And then, of course, our trip to Laurel is on the end of the month.
Right.
So we got a lot of stuff coming up.
Yeah, we do. And if you live in, we don't know where exactly we're going to be yet, but we know where we're going to stay, but we're not going to invite you to where we're staying, because that might be a little weird.
We're staying in Laurel.
We are staying in Laurel
in a small cottage.
In a small cottage, yes. But if you live there, or if you live near there, let us know. We'd love to meet you. Love to say hi. Talk ideas, tiny ideas. Talk really big ideas too, if you want to do that.
Right.
But yeah, we'd love to see you. If you live in Calhoun, then
that's coming up in May.
That's coming up in May.
I don't know exactly the date, but
so we'll let everybody know that. But we'll be there for that, and we'd love to see you there too. So if you live in Calhoun, Georgia, Rome, Georgia, Chattanooga, Tennessee, any place like that,
come advocate for
this.
Yep, it'd be great if you could be there. They're having a fundraiser and a band.
Maybe we'll do a raffle for a Radio Tiny House T-shirt.
Oh, there you go. That'd be fun.
Or we could, if you own a brewery, I'd like to start doing Radio Tiny House beer. So, or just Tiny House beer. So,
well, there's that. There's a tiny town called Talking Rock.
Yes.
Between Calhoun and us. And they have a tiny brewery
in a railroad car. Yeah, it's cool. And
we need to go there.
It's relatively new.
I was like, wait.
I read about that the other day, and then Beth drove through there and said, "Did you know there was a brewery in Talking Rock?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did know that."
Yeah, it was.
Didn't know they were open yet.
Very busy, so that'll be fun. Maybe we can figure that part out too.
Yep, maybe so. So
okay,
I think we're done. The background noise is brought to you by our neighbors who are doing construction work, and by our LG air conditioner.
Exactly. And we've decided that we could edit out all kinds of stuff. We could make this perfect. Sometimes I'll say, I'll edit that out. And then Barry just leaves it in.
I just leave it
in. We've just decided that this is life and this is how we're going to do this. And if because there's two things. We're busy. It's hard to get time to get all the editing done.
Right.
Barry puts it on podcast and I put it on YouTube. And then I add music and whatever. But the other thing is, if we edit out everything that's imperfect,
right,
then we're talking about perfectionism, which is what, as an organizer, I'm trying to get away from.
Right.
And so if you have a perfect podcast and Barry's in a podcast group and somebody edits out all their breaths, I'm like, oh my God, how do you edit however many breaths are out?
I do realize that I have an excessive amount of ums in some of our podcasts. And if I can, I'll go edit those out. But mostly... No umming. Mostly...
you are an ummer.
That's I am an ummer. I'm also a drummer.
He's an ummer drummer.
When you say a lot, that's generally a sign that you're a genius.
Oh, is that what that's a sign of? I didn't know that. Oh, that's hilarious.
It's
we've got a weird lag.
We'll speed it up a little bit maybe and make everything work out. So have a great day. You can reach us at radiotinyhouse.com. Send us an email if you want to get in contact with us at radiotinyhouse@gmail.com. And we will see you next week.
Yep.
Have a great one.